So let's talk a little bit about benefit programs. So SSDI and SSI. SSDI refers to Social Security Disability Income. That requires that the recipient of Social Security Disability worked and contributed through federal insurance contributions through their paychecks, through payroll deductions for 40 quarters of coverage or 10 years of work, and had to have done so for at least the immediately preceding 5 years. Boy, if that's not a mouthful, I don't know what is. It entitles the individual to Medicare coverage 24 months after being awarded Social Security disability. That is one of the beautiful aspects of Social Security. So you may have a special needs individual who, either based on their own work history or the work history of a parent, receives Social Security disability and hence Medicare 24 months after being awarded SSDI. When I talk about the work history of their parent, if a parent is disabled and has been adjudicated as disabled, deceased, or retired, the disabled child can receive an enhanced disabled adult child benefit, which will enable them to receive Social Security disability benefits on the basis of their parents' work history and eventually Medicare. Now, some of those individuals still need to receive SSI because the Social Security disability payment they're receiving is not large enough. And the time period that they have to wait to receive Medicare, they may still have to apply for Medicaid. So it's not foolproof. So if the disabled individual is receiving Social Security disability, that is not a means-tested program. So the trustee has much more latitude in making distributions to the individual if they're receiving Social Security disability and Medicare, because Social Security and disability and Medicare are not means-tested programs, because they're all dependent upon someone paying through their paychecks into those programs. If the person is receiving Social Security disability and Medicaid, the trustee must be aware of the asset limitation under Medicaid and maintain the disabled individual's total personal assets below $999. If the person is receiving SSI and Medicaid, the trustee must be vigilant in ensuring the use of trust funds does not jeopardize benefits, again, unless the trustee determines that doing so is in the individual's best interest and it's allowed by the language of the trust. Unfortunately, there are some trusts that are not written to give the trustee that discretion. So again, the power of the trustee really comes directly from the language in the trust. So what is SSI? SSI is a means-based federal program administered by the Social Security Administration. And there is the law, if anyone is really interested in looking up the law. It is an income maintenance program. It's a safety net for individuals who are indigent and disabled individuals who don't have sufficient quarters of work coverage to qualify for Social Security disability. Unfortunately, if they do not qualify for Social Security disability, they cannot qualify for Medicare until they're 65. And I have a client who is in that situation. They worked, but they don't have quite enough work history and they're not yet 65. SSI provides the individual recipient with 75% of the federally determined poverty level in the then current year. And the monthly payment for 2020 is $783. And the amount that they receive per month is called the federal benefit rate, and it must be used under SSI for food and shelter. So SSI is a morass of eligibility and use requirements. So income under SSI is anything a person receives in cash or in kind that can be used to meet a person's needs for food or shelter in a particular 30-day period. If that money rolls over into the next month, it is then considered an asset. So income is countable or non-countable, earned or unearned, cash or in kind, and the first $20 is disregarded.
You have to live in the same state as the beneficiary for the trust.
No, definitely not. It is, now, that being said, you do not have to. But if you do not, because of how unique the role of a special needs trustee is, they really need to have someone who is in physical proximity to the disabled individual, either a care manager. That is probably the most common individual that is hired by a special needs trustee, if the trustee is not in the same state, is a care manager to oversee what is going on with the individual and report back to the trustee or a family member. Deeming of income to the SSI, applicant or recipient. What this means is that if an individual who is over 18 and living with one or more parent, the parent no longer has a support obligation to that individual. So their income and assets are not deemed to count towards that individual's SSI. If they're living with a spouse who's not eligible for SSI, that spouse's income and assets are going to be deemed to be also available to the SSI applicant or recipient. Earned income are wages before deductions and net earnings from self-employment. So exclusions from earned income are federal assistance payments such as Social Security disability, $30 per quarter of infrequent or irregular income, $65 plus 1/2 of remaining income that is earned per month, so that the incentive is for somebody to work if they're able to physically. So infrequent or irregular income is defined as income that is received once per calendar quarter from a single source and is not received in the preceding month or the following month. That's how you define a quarter. Irregular income is income that the recipient cannot regularly expect to receive. So if they get income from an occasional job that is really infrequent, such as wrapping packages over the holidays, that's irregular income. Unearned income is obviously income that's not earned. Examples are alimony, annuity income, interest income, pensions, and inheritances. Exclusions from unearned income are tuition scholarships, again, $60 per quarter of infrequent and irregular income, and 1/3 of child support payments to a disabled child. The one concept that I definitely want to talk about before we end is in-kind support and maintenance. In-kind support and maintenance is the receipt of food or shelter provided by a third party, not money. In-kind support and maintenance reduces the SSI benefit received based on the lesser of the 1/3 rule or the presumed value rule. So if in-kind support and maintenance is provided that reduces the maximum SSI benefit by 1/3, the individual will still receive $583, because if their maximum benefit this year is $783, you divide it by 1/3, plus they can keep that $20, they're going to receive $583. So sometimes, again, the trustee may decide it's worth paying for somebody's rent because overall it's just going to reduce their maximum SSI payment and they'll receive $583. So if the SSI benefit is reduced, so the SSI benefit is reduced by 1/3 if the recipient is living in the home of a third party. If they pay their pro rata share of food or shelter, their SSI will not be reduced. So very often, if I have a disabled adult child that's living with their parents, the parents create a rental agreement with their adult child that includes food and shelter that equals the SSI payment received by the adult disabled child, that essentially the parents can then keep for the benefit of their disabled adult child. The downside of that is that it has to be counted as income on the parent's tax return because they're being paid for providing support through food and shelter that they're not legally required to provide. So my slide talks about earned income, unearned income, and in-kind support and maintenance. The next slide talks about SSI versus Social Security disability.
Can you have more than one trustee on the account?
Yes, you can have co-trustees. I prefer not to have co-trustees because if the co-trustees do not agree, you will have essentially a non-functional trust, which is absolutely not in the benefit to the benefit of the disabled individual. My preference is to have trustees named in sequence so that there's language that says Debbie Schuster is the first named trustee. If she's unavailable, unwilling to serve, refuses to serve, or certified as incapacitated by her physician, then Jennifer is the second named trustee. So to have them in sequence and have the ability to name a successor trustee, for example, if a trustee suddenly dies or becomes incapacitated and there's only one trustee left.
If there is no mortgage on the parent's home, can they still charge the adult rent?
Yes, yes. It has nothing to do with the mortgage. They are providing a service to an adult disabled child that adult disabled child would have to otherwise pay rent in another housing situation for.
And when can someone remove a trustee from the special needs trust?
It's a really good question. Usually there are provisions in the trust that allow removal. So if a trustee is misappropriating funds or misusing funds, either using them for themselves, for a person other than the disabled individual, they can absolutely remove the trustee. However, very often institutional trustees are removed because A, they're either no longer handling special needs trusts, or their fees become so exorbitant that they're really eating into the principle of the trust. So those are some really good reasons to remove a trustee. And that doesn't always require going to court. There is a legal document called a non-judicial settlement agreement that can be signed by all parties, particularly if a disabled individual has mental capacity. I just had a couple months ago a woman who had cerebral palsy, but had absolutely no problem understanding the need and the use of the special needs trust. And so she wanted to change her trustee or change some other provisions in her trust. So the person, her parent who created the trust, the remainder beneficiaries, and she all in writing agreed to these changes. And so we didn't have to go to court and ask the court's permission to change a trust, which under an irrevocable trust you would usually have to do. I'm going to run through the remainder of the slides if I can. So some other examples of SSI. Paying for non-food, non-shelter expenses will not affect SSI at all. However, it may be worth paying, for example, I talked about this before, the entire rent of someone because SSI will be reduced only by $281. And I'm sorry, this figure is wrong. It won't be $501. It'll be whatever the previous slide said. I don't have my calculator with me. The SSI asset threshold is $2,000 to be allowed to be retained by the SSI recipient. The important thing to know is that under Medicaid, that can be different. So not all of these public benefit programs work and play well together. Under SSI, there's certain non-countable assets, a home, an auto, and the other things that are listed here. So how to provide other forms of support, paying for other than food, paying for other than mortgage. These are all things that cannot be paid for because they relate to food or shelter. So paying for other things. You can purchase a home. It will only affect SSI for the month of purchase. But then how do you pay for the other expenses that were on that previous slide? You don't want to put the home in the name of a first party trust or the name of the SSI recipient, the Medicaid recipient, because there's the Medicaid payback requirement. Sorry, that's a typo. It shouldn't be SSI recipient, it should say Medicaid recipient. What else can you pay for? All of these things. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.